Welcome to Keen on Retirement, a show dedicated to helping you thrive before and during your retirement years. If you are looking to grow and protect your wealth and want to make the second half of your life the best half, then listen in as Wealth Advisor Bill Keen sorts through the key issues that you need to know in a lively and candid way.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Keen on Retirement. I'm your co-host, Steve Sandusky, and we are here with Bill Keen and Matt Wilson. Post-Thanksgiving now. Did you guys have a great Thanksgiving? I'm sure you had your fill of turkey and stuffing and pumpkin pie.
Yeah, it was great. Went out of town for a couple of days, visited my sister. She was hosting, and she lives just outside St. Louis in Lake St. Louis, Missouri. And it was a lot of fun.
Good. Oh, yeah. We did the, Matt, you had safe travels.
Mm-hmm.
Good. We did the turkey trot here down on Ward Parkway with the family that morning, which kind of gives you some permission to eat a little bit more there that afternoon. So not too bad.
It's funny you should say that, because sometimes I say to myself, I exercise so that I can eat dessert. But then when I'm eating the dessert, I'm thinking it took me 3 minutes to eat this dessert, and it took me an hour of exercising to burn the calories from what I just ate in 3 minutes. So is that a good trade-off?
You're not supposed to do that math, Steve.
I know.
Not on Thanksgiving.
I know. But just being analytical like I am, sometimes my mind does that.
Mm-hmm.
But we had all the kids in town, had a sleepover Thanksgiving night, had a couple dogs in as well. So we had a very nice Thanksgiving as well.
Nice.
Yeah, you teased us about that, or you told us about that on the last episode. So I'm glad that all worked, to your expectation and better, it sounds like.
Yeah. So it was all good. Well, I think you guys did something with Angel Flights here recently. So tell me a little bit about that, and then we'll do that. And then we're going to jump into the topic of today, which is we've got a case study. So we've got an interesting situation. I'll go through some of the particulars, and then you guys can give us some details on how we should plan around that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what was going on with the Angel Flight Central?
Yeah, Steve. So about a week and a half ago, we had the Angel Flight Central Wine Flight Gala. And, I've got a little frog in my throat here. You might be able to tell on our episode today, but I wasn't about to cancel on you all and our listeners. Sometimes you just got to suit up and show up. And by the way, for those of you watching on YouTube, you can see I did suit up today. I have a full suit and tie on, and both Matt and Steve are, they're coming in a little less than that, but that's okay.
You're a tough standard to live up to, Bill.
Yeah.
Well, I had the frog in my throat, so I figured
it's a
I
new
needed
suit,
to
so you had to show it off.
Okay.
It
And
is.
you got the white pocket square there too.
Oh yeah,
Little touch of class.
On to this style. I said I'm going to hang on to this style till it comes back in style.
That's right.
And
What's old is new again.
So we had our gala a week and a half ago, and as you might know, I'm on the board of Angel Flight Central. I'm also a pilot for Angel Flight Central. We're an organization based in the Midwest here that provides humanitarian flights for those in need. So we will do, if somebody's in Western Kansas, just as an example, and they need to get to Mayo Clinic for a treatment that otherwise is not available anywhere else but Mayo Clinic, and they're not able to get there. They're not able to drive or fly commercial for a myriad of reasons. We will scramble one of our approximately 350 volunteer pilots to their location and get them to Mayo Clinic, or whatever hospital they need to go to. In my example, I'm using Mayo Clinic because that is somewhere we go a lot, and get them home. And we'll do that as many times as they need to get there and back, 100% for free for those patients and families. And so we've got an incredible amount of, we actually call them our angels, the pilots that donate their time, their aircraft, their fuel, to get these folks where they need to go. We've done other humanitarian missions during things like flooding, when the floods were up in Nebraska. We got personnel and supplies in We got people out from where they needed to be. Any number of humanitarian missions that are just come up that are in need. And so we do a gala every year that is basically our primary fundraiser. My wife, Carissa, is the event chair. So she did one heck of a job again. She's been the chair here a few years in a row. And Keen Wealth was the main sponsor of the gala for the fourth year in a row as well. So we had just a nice showing. We had almost 700 people in attendance. We raised, I saw a number, $530,000 at this event. And finally, I know we want to get to our case study, but I love to give awareness to this wonderful charity that we support a lot of different charities, and they're all good. Of course they are. But the thing I really love about Angel Flight, one, aviation's a passion of mine, and I'm a pilot. I get to actually fly patients. The last patient I flew actually was from here about a month and a half ago, was from Mayo back home to Arkansas. And I got to fly a gentleman and his son back and get to know them and provide that service. Mm-hmm. It was pretty cool. But one of the cool things about Angel Flight is for every dollar we raise, we're able to deliver almost $5 of actual service to the end patient. And you might ask, how does a charity multiply donations? How's that possible? Because most charities you look at, you say, I give $1, how much of my dollar actually goes to the patients? And it's some fraction of the dollar. So how in this case, if we give $1, can almost 5 times of that go to the patients? Well, it's because our pilots are donating their time, their airplanes, their fuel, and we're conducting several thousand flights a year. And we are, as Angel Flight, we're the coordinators. We're like a small airline dealing with weather, dealing with FAA regulations, dealing with scheduling, dealing with doctors and hospitals and patients, and bringing this all together. So our little operation runs on a really efficient budget, but we're delivering like service that is like 5 times what it costs. Not quite. It's like 4.5 times what it costs to run our operation annually. So anyway, thanks for asking about that. And thanks for letting me give a little bit of awareness there to Angel Flight. We've done it in the past, but we just had our big gala and it was a huge success. So thanks for giving me that time there, Steve. And then finally, I think probably as important, if not most important, is it's about awareness, right? We've got capacity. So you never know when you're going to either one of us, who knows, or somebody that we care, love about, or know in our networks finds themselves in a predicament where they need to get somewhere for healthcare. And this isn't just children, it's adults, it's all ages. It's if you know someone somewhere that needs to get to healthcare and for whatever reason cannot make it to their appointments, whether it's a cancer treatment, whether it's possibly a transplant or just a specialist of any kind, you'd be surprised at how many times somebody that doesn't realize they're going to be in that position, all of a sudden in a heartbeat ends up in that position and needs help. Go straight to that angelflightcentral.org website, and we make it super easy to get in touch with us and get connected with one of our schedulers to get on the plan. And again, 100% for free service that we're providing there at Angel Flight Central. We've got capacity to do more.
And I'm in Oregon. If I need to go from Oregon to the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio, do I go through Angel Flight Central, or is there like an Angel Flight Northwest that would sort of coordinate that?
Great question. So there are different, as I mentioned, we're Angel Flight Central, so we cover 12 states in the Midwest, but we have our friends Angel Flight West and Southwest. We have there's many different types of services like ours. A lot of them are Angel Flights, different regions. But there's others as well that we coordinate with. So if you had a flight that went across those regions, you get in touch with any of us, and we'll make it happen and coordinate with the other providers.
Got it. Okay, good. So that's easy. So I don't have to think about, I got to call Angel Flight here. I could just go Angel Flight Central, and if I'm not in their region, they'll make sure I get connected to the right place that can help me in my area.
That's correct. And our staff is they're amazing. It's amazing the work that they do, taking these incoming phone calls from folks, at some of the lowest points in their lives, thinking they're not going to be able to get, in many cases, the life-saving care they need, and having it come to fruition. Just unbelievable, actually. So it makes me really proud and honored to be a part of the organization.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you.
So thanks to all you pilots and all the donors and all the folks that that are, have supported it over the many years, and the staff down there, the board is an incredible board, more engaged than any board I've ever been involved with in the charitable world. So good stuff here. Again, I didn't mean to commandeer our episode, Steve, but you're asking me some good questions. So
That's right.
Hey, you never know who might be listening that actually will need some help. And if one person found out about it that got help that otherwise wouldn't have, I would say, fine, we'll dedicate the whole episode to it then.
That's right. Great. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank
and
you.
thank Carissa for her helping to put together and sharing the gala there. So appreciate all the extra work you two are doing there.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let's jump into the case study today. So here are the particulars that we're going to talk about. Is we've got a couple here. We've got Sam and Alice, and Sam retired at the end of the first quarter of 2024, and their financial situation is they've got about $400,000 in a Roth IRA. They have $400,000 in a taxable account, and then they have another $2 million in an IRA. And as of 2024, Sam's income was about $75,000, and Alice's income was about $20,000. And Alice is a paid caretaker, and they have a special needs son, and that son is going to need some care for probably another 5 to 10 years. So I think a few things that we want to talk about here today are health insurance. Obviously, a big issue as people are getting into their 60s, and particularly with a special needs child. Talk about Roth conversions, and I think that's particularly timely given what may be happening to tax rates here over the next 12 to 18 months. And then we also, I think, want to talk about some income planning for the remainder of this year and into future years. So let me stop there. Some of the details, Matt, how are you going to tackle this one?
Yeah. A couple of things, as you mentioned, what their issues are, especially the planning items that we've got to be aware of. Sam is also 58. That's an important piece of information. Alice is 65, and they have the special needs son. They also have another son who's off the payroll, so to speak, so out of the home and doing well. And because it's a partial year, there was a few things, and this is why I thought this would be a good case study, because a lot of times we just talk about when someone's in retirement and speak to things as if they were retired the entire year. Well, what happens if they had some earned income throughout the year and then they retire? Well, what does that impact? Well, it impacts health insurance for one, because a couple of things related to that, because you can choose to stay on COBRA, assuming you had access to health insurance through your employer. Stay on that, pay those premiums. In this case, Alice, 65, well, she's eligible for Medicare, so they wanted to go that route, and they evaluated the COBRA compared to the healthcare marketplace. So, healthcare.gov, where you go to the website there that the government puts out to apply for health insurance. Well, when you go to that website, I encourage people, especially if you're getting close to retirement and you're going to need health insurance prior to Medicare, it's a very simple website. I mean, it's not overly complex, but I think it's good to play around with it a little bit just to understand how it works, because you can put in, like right now, if you're pricing out health insurance for 2025, you go to the website, put in your zip code, because it is based on where you live, and plug in some basic information. You don't have to provide any of your personal information. All they really want to know is your age, if this plan is going to be for yourself, a spouse, or more than that, multiple people, and then what's your health status. And they've got boxes to check, like, are you a tobacco user? Do you have access to health insurance too? I mean, that's one of the questions. Do you already have access to it? And then they ask, what is your income? Because the healthcare exchanges and the government, part of the Affordable Care Act, when that was passed in 2013, provides subsidies to those, what they consider lower income people. It's not based on assets. It's based on income. So based on your income is what, is how much your premium you're going to pay. And currently the laws are written as such that it's capped to like 8.5% of your AGI. So that's how they determine what that kind of subsidy is, because they assume, the government kind of said no one should pay more than 8.5% of your adjusted gross income for your health insurance premiums. Now, it doesn't necessarily include deductibles. That's just premiums. And you can go on there. Once you plug in that information, it'll give you what your how much of a subsidy is available to you. And then it'll list out all the plans, and you can sort by, a lot of different ways. You can filter things out, and you can plug into estimated use. And it also has some very simplistic ways to estimate it, like low use, medium use, heavy use. So just to give you an idea, if you do visit the doctor regularly, maybe you select heavy use, and it can give you an idea of, okay, you might hit most of your deductibles. So what's your total cost, premiums and deductibles? So that's again, I find a very useful website, especially for those that are under age 65, to just understand how the healthcare exchanges work and the subsidy, because you can play around with your income. So this is where we come in, and we help people understand, well, what's the trade-off with more or less income? And there's a tipping point where if your income's too low, that's not good, because it assumes that you should be on Medicaid because you have no income or very little and not actually be eligible for a subsidy. So we looked at this for this client, and plugged in. We already know what they have this year. Like, there's no, he worked the first 3 months of the year. His wife is actually paid. She's a paid caretaker for her son, so she earns about $20,000 a year. So they have around $95,000 in earned income, plus some ancillary dividends, interest, things like that. So their total income came into about $105,000. And we used that for the healthcare subsidy. And he ended up getting around $400 a month as a subsidy, paying around $300 a month for his health insurance monthly premiums for the remainder of 2024. Now, one of the items, though, so that's on the healthcare side. One of the items that we look at every single year, especially for our working clients, yes, and even more so for our retired clients, is we want to take a picture or have an understanding of someone's lifetime tax picture. Now, we don't know exactly what someone's lifetime tax bill is going to be. I wish we did. It'd be a lot easier to plan for, but we don't. And, there's several inputs and kind of some tipping points within, someone's lifetime tax picture. It's like, okay, what's the makeup of your asset base? Because if you've got a large 401k or traditional IRA where money is being, it's growing tax deferred, well, we know there's this looming required minimum distribution. It's at age 73 today, slowly creeping up to age 75. But that's the age at which the IRS says, we're tired of you not paying any money on this asset. You haven't paid any taxes on it. We're going to force some out. This required minimum amount. Now, a lot of people are already spending that minimum, so they don't necessarily have to take out more than that, but it may be significantly more than what they need. And that is all taxed as ordinary income. Well, when that ordinary income flows through the tax brackets, it pushes you into higher tax brackets, but also might trigger additional surcharges. Like, for one thing, capital gains tax you pay no tax on capital gains and qualified dividends as long as you're under the top of the 12% bracket for, both a single filer and a married filer. As your income crosses through that threshold, well, now capital gains and ordinary or qualified dividends are taxed at 15%. So that's in addition to the federal tax that you're paying on your other income. Social Security tax, it's a formula. You can kind of see it. We have a graph. It's really neat to show to clients because it'll show, okay, here's what your federal tax is, like just the brackets, stair stepping up. And then we'll have different colors of all these other hidden taxes that show up. Now, we find it neat. Now, people don't necessarily like to see all that because they're like, well, wait a minute, I didn't know I was paying all that. They're like, yeah, visually, it's the government doesn't necessarily want you to understand it like this. They just withhold your tax and, go away is basically what the government wants. We have net investment income tax. So that's part of the passing of the Affordable Care Act. That's, additional tax. And it's like this portion of your income. It's around, I believe it's around $50,000 that it applies to. So it's not like this indefinite tax that shows up once you hit a certain dollar amount for the rest of your income. It's just like this window. And then you have Medicare surcharges that are hidden throughout this whole thing too. And we can visually show all that. And so we're always looking at, okay, what's lifetime tax picture? How do we minimize that? These RMDs are a big portion of it, and we're estimating some growth rates, and we're conservative, but we also have to put some estimates in for taxes. Are taxes going to be higher or lower in the future? Well, right now, we're currently running everything as if the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which, Steve, you mentioned earlier, that passed under President Trump when he was in office during his first term. And then it was set to expire at the end of 2025, or is set to expire at the end of 2025. And then the taxes would revert back to the higher brackets that, that existed prior to this passing. Well, now that Trump was reelected and Congress fell kind of in his favor, it is highly likely that that is going to continue. And it may even get slightly better. We'll see as more proposals come out, but definitely don't see taxes going up. And it's even possible to see that those things are passed without a sunset provision, meaning they're just set indefinitely. So then Congress would have to do something to actually change it. So we run this kind of lifetime tax picture, come up with this, all right, here's what we think your lifetime tax bill will look like based on the makeup of your assets. How can we reduce that? And that's where Roth conversions come into place. For this couple, we looked at Roth conversions, but for others, it's also charitable giving. These are other strategies that help reduce the lifetime tax picture, whether it's through utilizing donor advised funds or qualified charitable distributions, things like that.
And Matt, we've had some people ask us recently, hey, since Trump got in office, does it make Roth conversions less attractive now? Well, you could say, well, we believe taxes are going to stay down now for at least 4 years. You just said maybe longer if he makes it to where Congress would have to act to raise taxes. But I would argue that, if a Roth conversion makes sense, we're not converting something to a Roth to pull it back out again in 4 years or less.
That's right.
So the question is, what will taxes be 20 years from now?
That's
15 years from now, maybe even farther out from now. And so Trump being elected might have less of an impact on whether a Roth conversion makes sense or not. It's does it make sense first off, and then we'll worry about what we think taxes are going to be down the road.
Yeah. Really the way to think about the Roth conversion is if someone had this, that the current tax law and the current tax bracket that they're in, let's say they're retired and they're in the 12% bracket, and they will be in the 12% bracket for the rest of their life, and they never see that ever changing. Well, it's kind of a wash. Sure. You pay the tax or not pay the tax, because in that case, everything's the same. But what we know is that, okay, well, the government is running massive deficits and has a lot of debt. And at some point, do we have to pay that back? We talked about this on a previous episode, may never. But is it likely that taxes are going to go higher? And I say likely, meaning like, okay, 51% chance that they're going to be higher in the future. I seem to think that that's possible. May not be significantly higher, but higher is higher. So there's this tax, what we call tax arbitrage, where it's like we're paying a little bit of tax today to minimize higher taxes in the future. And that can be, part of it can be these RMDs, because especially for this couple, they do have a good amount in Roth already. We've been converting money actually prior to retirement. And then they also have a nice taxable, account balance. So they're able to live on that and convert money to a Roth IRA. while they're waiting for Social Security to start as they age and things like that. This Roth conversion for them, we just looked at a very simplistic Roth conversion where we just used up the rest of the 12% bracket, for the next 4 years. Slightly larger Roth conversion this year, but not significantly larger. And it saved them $150,000 over their lifetime tax bill. That's based on our assumptions that this is what the tax code is going to look like. If taxes go higher, well, then they saved even that much more.
The other thing too, Matt, in our modeling, and we don't need to get too detailed in it, but we use some pretty conservative growth rates on the portfolios.
Mm-hmm.
Historically, accounts have done better than what we're using, just because we want to plan conservatively. If that's the case, it also makes the savings quite a bit more as well.
That's right, because those future RMDs are higher.
Yes.
If growth is more, and that's why it's not like we just set this plan up for them and then follow it blindly for the next 30 years. We evaluate it every single year. And if taxes go lower, then, that's a risk. I mean, we do talk about that. Hey, if taxes are lower, maybe you paid a little bit more today. But when we look at this lifetime tax picture, the other thing we're able to come up with is almost like an average or an effective rate to say, okay, your lifetime effective rate is 18%, for example. Well, if we just have that as a way to measure against, then we could say, well, in any given year, if we're under this 18% effective rate, we should convert. And if we're over that, then we shouldn't. If that's, again, it's simplistic, but it's a way to just think about this. But we have to start with what our lifetime tax bill looks like. And most of the clients do feel like they are, I wouldn't say targets, but they feel like these required distributions are going to continue to get larger, and they're going to probably figure out ways to tack on additional surcharges when your income goes up. One of the things that, even when Trump was running for re-election, that talked about no tax on Social Security, and it's definitely possible. I mean, we will know more when Congress reconvenes and kind of starts talking in 2025 about what these proposals will be and what's the likelihood of something like that happening. Definitely could happen. But then at some point, they're going to have to address the fact that the Social Security trust funds are running out of money. And solutions are, okay, increase the full retirement age, increase the ages of when you can take it because people are living longer, increase the FICA tax. So that's the payroll tax that workers pay while they're working. But another proposal, this hasn't been discussed because none of the politicians really do want to talk about it, is, well, they could add a surcharge similar to Medicare. So if your income's over $200,000, you might pay an extra 10% on your Social Security. It just could be something they throw out there. I don't, probably wouldn't pass under a Trump administration, but I could see that under a different administration, something like that passing. So, these are things where it's like, it may not be a significant hit to the tax brackets, but these are little hidden taxes that seem to find their way into the tax code from time to time, that a lot of people, when we kind of talk through all that, believe that those are risks. So by converting money to a Roth IRA, we're eliminating those future risks. So that's the other advantage. It's like you've taken, and it's not why we don't say convert everything. One, because you're going to pay a lot in taxes, but two, it's just about minimizing the risks as we understand them today. And how do we do that?
And at the risk of maybe getting too much detail here,
sure.
When you analyze a Roth conversion, do you look at like the time value of money? Do you look at the opportunity cost? Meaning, if I do a Roth conversion today and I pay the taxes, well, that's less money that I have working for me. When I had it in the IRA that was growing tax deferred, I'm missing out on any potential capital gains or future gains or growth of that because I pay taxes on it today. So how does that get calculated into your analysis of when it makes sense to do a Roth conversion?
Yeah. No, that's definitely one of the factors that we consider, because, and it kind of stems down to how much tax is an appropriate amount. And that's where it's different probably based on who you talk to, because I'm sure there's some people that think taxes are going to be way higher in the future. So they're more than happy paying up to 32% on their, on their Roth conversion, because they believe it's going to be way worse. For us, when we look at where tax brackets have been currently and where they've been historically, it's like in that 12 to 22, I could even make a case to say 24% range. That's a pretty low amount when we compare it to someone's lifetime tax bill. So yes, we give that up today. And so there is a time value of money calculation that's run in the background. So when we calculate our tax savings, as I mentioned, this couple, about $150,000, that's factored in, because over time, we'll catch that back up. The balances may still be higher in the traditional IRA had you not converted, but you have this deferred tax liability, where in the Roth IRA, because assuming the investments make the same, you'd never catch that back up, but you still have to pay the tax, or at least your beneficiaries have to pay it if you don't when you pass away. And that's the other unknown.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, what tax bracket are they going to be in? Are they going to be higher or lower? So
a lot of assumptions go into this
Yes.
to some extent. And, just a little inside baseball here, as financial pros, oftentimes we'll talk about how there is an optimal financial decision, and that if you just look at the numbers, the numbers would say, here's the optimal decision to make. But there are times when the client will say, even though that may be the optimal financial decision, I just feel more comfortable from a psychology standpoint, or just from a comfort or security standpoint, doing something else that may not be financially optimal, but it's still okay, sort of thing.
Yes.
Do you run into that at all when it comes to Roth conversions, where you say, hey, based on everything we know, based on the assumptions we're making, our recommendation is it does make sense to do a Roth conversion. You save $150,000. Do you then have clients who sometimes will say, I kind of get that, but I feel more comfortable, not doing that?
Yep.
Did you run into that at all with Roth conversions?
We do. Because, there is a part of that conversation is, here's what that tax liability is going to be for this year for that Roth conversion. And there's some clients that are like, I just don't, that's a lot to pay in taxes, and I don't want to pay that. And it's completely, because first and foremost, we start with, does the plan work? Does our plan without any of these strategies? So it's like, yeah, we do nothing. We know what this, at least our projection's going to be if we do nothing. And that works. There's nothing wrong with that. So that's okay. Then it's okay, well, how do we optimize it by, paying a little bit more tax today? And a lot of times in those cases, so, that's rare, but it does happen where someone's just not feeling as comfortable with a, and this could be $100,000, $200,000 Roth conversion, where they might be looking at a $30,000 to $50,000 tax bill. And it's like, man, that's a lot to pay. So we let's just dial it back. Let's say 50,000, and let's just look at that and see, is that worth it? Does that give us some tax savings? Yes. Okay. Now your tax, ramification on that is, 17,000, not, and they're okay, more comfortable with that than something larger. And that's, for us, it's not it's like, hey, we understand it, it's your money. We're here to just help you optimize your situation and also point out potential, issues in the future, like these IRMA surcharges that you may not be paying today, but when we see the RMD start kicking in the next few years, you're going to be hitting those. And it's just, you're most likely never going to get out of it either. So you're going to have this constant kind of extra tax. So yeah, we pay a little bit of tax today. Does it help us avoid those in the future? That's kind of things like that we're trying to point out and provide that analysis so that they can at least understand it. It's sometimes those are, tough checks to write. It's funny too, because it's not like you get anything for writing a big check to the IRS. They don't send you a thank you. You don't get
It'd be nice if they did.
If you're going to the DMV to, get something, it's like you still got to wait in line like everyone else. They don't just give you a fast pass if you happen to pay a certain dollar amount in taxes or anything like that.
But at least there you get a license plate or you get a driver's license. You get something tangible in return.
That's true. That's true. So, and with this couple, so another kind of nuance to their situation is the IRA is in his name. He's 58. And so we're looking at a Roth conversion for them this year. And one of the conversations that we're having with them is, well, if we withhold tax, because one of the ways that we can process a Roth conversion is to distribute a gross amount and then withhold the federal and state taxes so that the net amount is, put in the Roth, the rest is, sent to the government. And that's a very common way to do it, just because folks don't necessarily have the cash on hand to write the check if they didn't want to withhold. Well, in this case, because he's under 59 and a half, you can convert money to a Roth IRA and there's no 10% penalty, the penalty for early withdrawal, except if you withhold that money to pay the tax, then the 10% of penalty is applied to what was withheld. So kind of an interesting kind of piece to this. So for example, if we were to convert $100,000 out of their Roth or from their IRA to their Roth, and let's say their tax bill was $20,000, they'd actually have to pay $22,000 if they withheld it because of this extra 10% penalty. So we were talking through that. They have a nice cash reserve and plus some nice amount of after-tax assets. So we could process it no withholding, and then they just write the check come tax time out of their taxable assets, which is what they're going to do in their case, because they just prefer not to pay that extra 10% penalty. And that was part of our conversation with them today too.
So that raises a question. Mm-hmm. If you do this Roth conversion and you're 58 and now it's in a Roth IRA, mm-hmm. can I take that money out prior to 59 and a half once it's in the Roth IRA and not pay the 10% penalty? How does that work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you've got to keep the money in there for 5 years. And that is for the growth to be, penalty-free, tax-free, everything else. But you always have access to what you contributed. But the conversions, if you're under 59 and a half, there's a special rule around the conversions that you have to be aware of, because that government isn't just saying, because, normally you put money into a Roth IRA via contribution, that's just with your earned income. You can withdraw that money you put in at any time because you've already paid the tax on it. The growth has to stay in there until you're 59 and a half or 5 years, whichever, whatever's longer. And once you're over 59 and a half, same thing. You can, as long as you've had the account open for at least 5 years, you can access the whole thing, but you always have access to the corpus. But on a conversion, if you're under 59 and a half, they don't want you just doing that and then taking it out and avoiding the 10% penalty. So that has to stay in there also until 59 and a half.
Even the corpus has to stay
right.
in if you do it prior to 59 and a half.
Yeah. Because that's their,
okay.
Because you'd be kind of sneaking around the penalty by just saying, I'm converting it to a Roth, but not really. So they don't allow you to do that.
Well, Matt, it wouldn't be the first loophole in the tax laws, right?
Sure.
If people did that.
Yeah. I mean, it's they've had stuff like that happen, and then they fix it, a year or two later, right, because it was not written correctly or however it was interpreted. So the other thing with this couple, this was kind of an interesting thing because we wanted to do income planning because we want to make sure, we want to understand what their income is each year so that we can help them put in with the healthcare exchanges what their income is so they can determine what their health insurance costs are. Well, this year, we're in this situation where we know they've earned $95,000 and have taxable income about $105,000 with everything. Well, if we convert money to a Roth IRA, that's going to increase their income. And one of the questions they had and the concerns they had is like, well, I already told the government, the healthcare.gov, what my income is, and I'm getting this subsidy. So what happens? Well, what happens is when you file your taxes, the government, part of that tax filing is going to have a healthcare calculation because you're receiving, health insurance through the exchanges, and it's going to determine whether you have to pay back. If you're receiving a subsidy, do you have to pay any of that back? And in this case, if we were to convert $100,000, they would have to pay that back. So that's part of our calculation too, because it's almost like, well, it's not a tax, but it's going to be paid as if you were, triggering a tax. So that's part of that analysis is if they are receiving a subsidy, how much do they have to pay back? And there's no penalty associated with it. That's what they were concerned about. Like, I already told them a number, and if let's say I'm way off, are they going to be mad at me and say, yeah, not only do you have to pay it back, but you have to pay us a penalty because you lied on your form? And the government knows that that's not necessarily easy for everyone to determine what their income is every year. Plus, it wouldn't behoove them to, well, in some cases, people do this, but it's like they want to incent people to work. So they're like, well, if you happen to go get another job, we're not going to just penalize you to make it where like, well, I don't want to get this job because you're going to penalize me on this health insurance. Like, that doesn't necessarily make sense. So, and if you over-reported your income and are actually owed a bigger subsidy, you'll get that back on your tax return too. It goes both ways. So the income planning, you can tell them what you think your income is, but if it's different, it's not gonna hurt you.
You made a comment earlier about you want to have some amount of income to get a subsidy, but you don't want to have zero income because then the government might say, well, you need to be on Medicaid as opposed to, the ACA type plan. If someone has the ability to have as much or as little income as they want, and they want to try and get the maximum healthcare.gov subsidy to be on that kind of plan, what kind of income would you be looking at? And this is, I'm particularly thinking someone like nearing retirement where they say, well, I'm going to go a couple years and just put $20,000 of income because I can do a little bit of consulting work and I can get an 80% discount on my health insurance until I turn 65 and can get Medicare. Do people do those sorts of things?
Oh, yeah.
Or does the government look back and say, oh, last year you made $300,000 and so you're not going to get any subsidy because we look back the previous 2 years, or we look forward 2 years, or how does the government calculate what your income is to determine what kind of discount you get? And if you wanted to get sort of the maximum subsidy, what is like the amount of income that you would need to get the maximum subsidy, but not lower than that? So they'd say, oh, you need to be on Medicaid.
Yeah. So a couple of things with that. So it's all based on adjusted gross income. So on your 1040, the first page is basically, that's what your adjusted gross income. So prior to deductions. So it's earned income, it's pensions, annuities, IRA distributions, Social Security income. These are all kind of components. So it's like anything that, dividends, interest that you are receiving that is taxable. And so it's not asset based. So you could have a 1,000,000-acre farm that doesn't generate any income, that's worth a lot of money, but it generates no income, that you could, essentially say, well, I don't have any income, which is true because that's based on income, not on assets.
Which is sort of the Warren Buffett model, right? I'm worth, tens of billions of dollars, but I take $100,000 a year salary, so I pay a low tax rate.
That's right. Yeah. Why he's like, I don't know why Berkshire doesn't pay a dividend, because that would be income,
Right.
He just keep the cash in there. So so that's how they determine what you're eligible for. And so with the way the next factor is then you've got to be you have to have income that's at least 100% of the federal poverty level. So that's, adjusts slightly each year. But for 2024, if your household size is only one person, or if you're only trying to, in this case, like with Sam, we're only looking for the health care for him because his wife's on Medicare. That would be, actually it's $14,580. And then if your income is more than that, then the subsidy slowly kind of goes down until it hits about that 8.5% of your AGI, because that's kind of where they're capping how much you should pay on your health insurance. So that 100%, if you have two people, it's $19,720. It's not a ton of income, but it's definitely enough to where, if you didn't have a job and you didn't have any assets, it might be hard for some people to hit. If this, example that I mentioned, or if, the Warren Buffett example, if he truly had no income but had all these assets and applied and they said, okay, you would have to apply for Medicaid, well, then that's asset based. They do look at assets on Medicaid, so he wouldn't be eligible for that. So, they would, in his case, you'd be basically, hey, you got to figure out how to generate 15,000 of income so you can at least get on here and get these subsidies. So,
right. So if a single person makes about $15,000, then they're going to qualify for like the maximum subsidy for the health plan.
That's right.
And that maximum subsidy, is that like 80%, or do you get it free, or is there still some minimum amount that you have to pay as a premium?
A lot of times it's premiums can be zero, and then you just have the out-of-pocket costs. So, in some cases I've seen where, you're even getting some of those out-of-pocket costs covered, but for the most part, it's the subsidies apply to the premiums. And in this case with Sam, he was going to pay $700 a month for his health insurance, but because of the subsidy based on his income that he self-reported, he was getting a $400 a month subsidy, so he was only paying $300 for the premium. Then if he had, doctor's visits, things like that, well, he'd have his copays and it'd apply to his deductibles on top of all of that.
And are there situations where it would make sense for a married couple to file their taxes separately? Because let's say one partner makes a very good income and they don't need the health insurance, whereas the other partner has the ability to not make an income or maybe make $15,000 a year, but they're not eligible for Medicare yet. And so they might file separately for tax purposes to just show the one person who does want to get a subsidy for the health coverage has like $15,000 of income. Can you even do that? Is that something that happens, or is that not legal to do?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that. It's possible. You'd have to make sure that you're going to file that way. I mean, that would be number one, because that is part of it. But a lot of times the government looks at married filing separately as a way to avoid certain things and disallows it. So essentially kind of says you're not, eligible for any subsidies if you file separately, no matter what. They just don't care. They do that with provisional income calculation when it comes to Social Security. If you're trying to minimize your Social Security tax, if you file separately, then you're triggered at $0. 85% of it counts as income, which is the highest amount. So I'm not positive on the healthcare exchanges if they allow you to, but I would feel like they would be looking at that and disallowing married filing separately unless there were certain circumstances that you could prove that this is why you're filing separately. If you live in separate addresses, things like that, a lot of times they do look at that and agree with that versus, well, no, we're all living together, but we just want to pay less for health insurance.
Yeah.
They try and sniff that out the best they can.
Sure. Yeah. And I think, what this case study continues to show is that there are lots of ways to think about the planning opportunities, and people that try and do it themselves oftentimes will miss a lot of opportunities just because they're not dealing with this stuff on a daily basis like you guys are. And you guys have, your detailed process that you follow to make sure that you don't miss any opportunity and that you're always checking these things. And so, it just pays to work with a professional because they catch this stuff, and in many, many situations, you're going to be able to save your clients so much more than what you may ever pay to get professional advice. So you get what you pay for.
Yeah, and one of the other things too with it is we work with a lot of engineers, as we've discussed, or employees of engineering firms, and very smart people that do the research and kind of then run calculations, but then they can get into this analysis paralysis too, because especially when it comes to the Roth conversion, there isn't a right answer because we don't know what the future holds. So you can't say for certain you should do this. I mean, there's a few cases where you can say, well, you should do this because you're paying zero tax. That's maybe a no-brainer, so to speak, in some cases. But a lot of cases, that's not the situation. You're paying some tax. So what's the appropriate? And they can get stuck, and, we're there to help. Here's how to think about it. Here's how to evaluate it. Here's the inputs and things like that to help make those decisions with them. And so they're comfortable with the decisions being made and plans moving forward.
Well done. Well done looking through
Mhm.
all these angles, Matt. I mean, like Steve said, there's so many things to look at and consider, and there's the spreadsheet answers, and then there's also where we come to in the middle at times. And it's just, it's about continuing the discussion and bringing awareness to these things and just not missing opportunities to make things more efficient, being awareness, and continuously discussing these things. So I thought you did a fantastic job with this case today, and kind of bringing these things. And Steve, good job on questioning him too, by the way. I was sitting back. I know you guys let me off the hook because of the frog in the throat a little bit here today. So I was enjoying you quizzing Matt down. He earned his money on this.
Yeah, that's
this
right.
episode
Yeah.
today.
Somebody's got to keep him on his toes.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, appreciate that. So Matt and Bill, thank you guys as always for the great work that you do and for doing this podcast here and sharing all the valuable content and insights that you guys are sharing. So for each of you listening, if you would like to learn more, please visit us at keenwealthadvisors.com. Please be sure to tell all your friends and colleagues about the podcast. We'd love for you and for them to subscribe to it if you haven't already. Please leave us a review on the podcast as well. That helps get the show gain more visibility. So that is very much appreciated. And we just appreciate y'all being listeners. So thank you. And we'll look forward to catching you on the next episode of Keen on Retirement.
Happy holidays, everybody.
The Steve Sandusky Advisor Network and Belay Advisor are not affiliated with Keen Wealth Advisors. Opinions expressed by Steve are his own and not necessarily the opinions of Keen Wealth Advisors. Keen Wealth Advisors is an SEC-registered investment advisor. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where Keen Wealth Advisors and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. The contents of this podcast are intended for the residents of the United States of America. No advice may be rendered by Keen Wealth Advisors unless a client service agreement is in place. This program is intended for informational purposes only and should not be construed as advice on or a recommendation of any particular investment, strategy, or as tax or legal advice for your specific situation. Keen Wealth Advisors is not a tax or legal advisor. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your licensed professional prior to investing. Information in this program was compiled from sources believed to be reliable. Due to the constant state of data changing, we do not guarantee the timeliness or the accuracy of the information provided. Our views or opinions at the time you are listening to the podcast may be different than they were when the podcast was recorded. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Any indices referenced for comparison are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. Any prices that are referenced or market forecasts are as of the date stated and are not necessarily our opinions moving forward. As always, please remember, investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. This podcast is not allowed to be copied, distributed, published, or reproduced without permission from Keen Wealth Advisors.